Here we are, and we're live. Hi, Julie.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing good. End of
Good.
the
New
day.
new time frame for us. It's late.
Yeah, it is late.
I had to drink a little caffeine while I was coaching class because I might fall asleep. It might be past my bedtime by the time we finish today, but
That's
that's all
true,
good.
but it'll still be light.
Yeah, well, kind of. It's dark right now, but
Oh, it's way light here.
is it?
Yeah.
All right. So, episode 10. We've hit our 10th episode.
Woo.
Yay. Episode
Yay.
10. Um, Deal breakers.
Deal breakers.
Deal breakers. I had a conversation with a friend today about this topic, and we came up with some scenarios that we can talk about as we get into the discussion. So, some of them obvious, some of them not so obvious. So, do you want to start us off with the definition?
Right. A deal breaker is anything that the two individuals in the relationship each feel strongly about, and not in agreement about, and are not willing to budge on.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily mean so my definite when I thought of deal breakers, I thought of what things could happen in a relationship that would make me want to say, "No way, there's no fixing this. I'm out." And your definition is a little different than that. There's a little more hope in your definition than my definition.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about more kind of egregious things,
Sure.
I would imagine.
Yep.
These don't necessarily. I mean, those are pretty obvious. You know,
Mhm.
um, some people, a betrayal for some people is a deal breaker. Um,
Right.
that's a little bit more obvious than. And there are more obvious ones and there's less obvious ones, but. So betrayal might be, for some people, it's a deal breaker. Now, the thing is with deal breakers is uh, sometimes people will say something is a deal breaker, and when it actually happens, then it's not so much of a deal breaker.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
So
I mean, that's
somebody might say, you might say, "Oh God, if anyone ever cheated on me," or "Hey, buddy, my husband or your partner, if you ever cheat on me, that's the end." And then something happens like cheating,
mhm,
and you're like, it's like when you're actually faced with that situation, oftentimes following through on that strong feeling that it would be over is harder to do than one thinks because of the attachment system.
yeah. It's kinda like when you tell your kids, "If you get another parking ticket, I'm gonna take your car away from you," and then they get another parking ticket, and you're like, "Oh, shit, I gotta take the car away.
Right.
Do I really
Right.
wanna take the car away?" That is not real life situation, by the way. But yeah, I get it. I totally understand.
Right. Right. And I mean, and it's even more complicated than that because the attachment system is at play,
Mhm.
and we don't want to uh, face loss.
Yeah. So what would be an example of something a little more innocuous than, the obvious of, infidelity, betrayal?
It can come about with regards to kids or no kids in a relationship. If
Oh, okay.
one person, like, they might get together and they might both say, "Yeah, I don't want kids," or "No, I don't. I definitely want kids." And then they're living life, and somewhere along the line, one of them changes their mind.
Mhm.
That could be a deal breaker. Could be somebody starts doing drugs. Could be somebody smokes cigarettes. Could be somebody travels for work. Somebody, I mean, it's like it really just depends on the situation, the couple. If it's somebody's traveling for work and the other person is like, "Dude, I never see you," and then when you come back, it's always disruptive for me and the kids. We can't get a rhythm, and then you leave, and then you're barely here, and this is a deal breaker for me if you continue to have this job. And the other person might be like, well, I can't find another job, so this is the job I have to be in. And so then you
Yeah.
have to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, so that brings us to sort of like how do couples sort of deal with these deal breakers? How do you work with them to sort of get through them or explore them a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's two different questions there: is how do couples
Okay.
usually deal with it, and how do I deal with it with couples?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because what couples usually do with deal breakers is they don't address them, and they just kick the can down the road,
Sweep them
and
under the rug. Yeah.
yeah,
We're good at
and it gets played out in lots of different ways with resentment or frustration or just unhappiness in the relationship, and it's just because they don't want to address it because and it's really painful.
Mhm.
How we deal with it in the office is that once a deal breaker is recognized, which is my job to recognize that there's a deal breaker at play, or sometimes couples come in and say, hey, I want kids, he doesn't want kids, or vice versa. They've already identified the deal breaker. um, but then we don't do anything else but resolve that deal breaker. So
Okay.
the relationship might have, you know, aspects that need shoring up, whether it's full transparency or um, not throwing one another on the bus, or talked about already. But we don't address any of those things before we deal with the deal breaker. And we don't, like, it could be many, many sessions
Sure.
where that's all we are doing, is we are not letting, and the couple will want to, you know, wax and wane and go over here and go over there and do this and do that and jump, do somersaults. Um, but a good therapist will allow that, will continue to bring them back to the deal breaker and have them keep working on it until, if and putting pressure on the system so that an actual decision can be made.
And I guess the resistance there of the couples to sort of go through it and to focus on it and not focus on other things is just because at the end there's gonna be some kind of decision, right? Because by virtue of the fact that we're calling it a deal breaker, right? Like, somebody either has to acquiesce or something has to change,
Yep.
right? I mean, somebody's gotta change the way they feel or what have you. Guys, tell me in the chat too, is Julie breaking up? Because she's breaking up for me, and I can't tell if it's my Wi-Fi or her Wi-Fi. So let me know in the chat what's happening there.
It's mine.
Oh, it is? Okay. I just wanna make sure because mine gets wacky too
Yeah.
sometimes. I've never done one of
It's
these.
my work. They were supposed to add a they were supposed to add a
Let's go.
like a
Work.
power booster, and they probably did.
Are you in the office? You're not home?
I'm at the office. Yeah.
Got it,
If I
okay.
was at home, you'd see two red rats running around,
I
and
was gonna
that would
say,
not
like,
be
where's the cat?
yeah, no. That the cat is the least of my concerns. It's the children. It's the
Yeah.
children.
So, can we work through a specific example maybe of one that's come up that you can sort of give us a dry run of how that would work?
Yeah,
The
let
kid
me
one.
think. I feel like I feel like I um hmm, we could just do the kid one. I
Yeah, I
can't
think that
I
one
can't remember.
makes sense.
Um so we could do, so one person comes in, says, I want kids. The other person is saying, I don't want kids. And so they have to advocate for their own side and why it would be, why, of course they're going to say why they want what they want or don't want what they don't want.
Mhm.
But they have to then advocate to the other person why it would be good for them. So if I'm coming in and I want children, then I'm going to try to present a case to my partner of why is it good for them to have us have kids,
Okay.
and why is it then good for the relationship? Because obviously, if I'm advocating for something, if I want something, it's because it's good for me.
Hopefully,
So
right?
we
Yeah.
already know that. We want to know why it's good. Right, right. We want to know why is it good for the partner as well as the relationship, and then the other person is going to advocate for their side. And
So
if
why is not
and
having
they
kids
just are
good
going to
for
be
us?
negotiating, yes,
Okay.
and then they're going to negotiate, and they're going to have conversations about what they're saying and see whether either one can say like, oh yeah, I get that, or and I'm bringing in resentment. If the one person changes their mind and says, okay, fine, then we just kids. Well, then I'm there to help them think about what might happen down the line if they're just acquiescing, or if they're just saying yes when they really might mean no, or if they really haven't thought it through and they're just trying to avoid loss. Um, so then we're talking about all of that. And if it gets to the point where they're not budging, then letting them sit with the two of you. This is a big deal, and you both strongly in opposite ways. And sounds like you might need to call it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about, having to explain to the partner why what you want would be good for them and the relationship. I would imagine it's sometimes those people can't think of a reason why it would be good for the other person. And then that's sort of, I would imagine, helps shape the outcome, like, light bulb moment, like, it's me, I'm being selfish, like, I want it, but I really feel like maybe it wouldn't be good for the relationship, and then I assume that helps get people through to that next decision-making point.
Yeah, and sometimes they can't come up with how it would be good for the other person or the relationship. They
Exactly.
simply are like, this is where I stand. I always have seen myself as a mother. That is what I've always wanted, and that is never going to change. And if I don't become a mother, I will be resentful. So if
Yeah,
you do not want to be a father or another parent with me, then this isn't going to work. But people will try to bend reality a lot of the time in order to avoid the loss.
sure, sure, or pretend
And
or yeah,
as a therapist, it's yeah, they will always try. It's just amazing what human beings will do. But as the therapist, you have to stand for reality and
mhm,
make sure that they're not bending that and living in fantasy land, and have them actually deal with what is.
yeah, I could see that for sure. So, we talked about what you do in therapy. We talked about what couples usually do, which is avoid and sort of brush it under the carpet. Um, let's talk about boundary versus ultimatum. Those were some of the things that are we there yet?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Okay.
Oftentimes when and this happens, because um, I think our society is really confused about codependence as and ultimatums and what is a boundary, and all of these terms that we kind of throw around. And so oftentimes if I'm with a couple and I'm putting some pressure on the system of, hey, sounds like his drinking doesn't work for you,
Hmm.
um, and then somebody will say that person might say, well, I don't want to give them an ultimatum of like, you either stop drinking or I'll leave.
Mhm.
And they don't they're not seeing it at, it's like if you're not willing to throw down like that, which isn't necessarily, it sounds like an ultimatum, but it's actually a boundary of like, hey, your drinking doesn't work for me. And if you continue to drink, that is okay. But I will then have to leave
Mhm.
because that is my boundary because, I grew up in an alcoholic family, whatever it is, like this just
Sure.
doesn't work for me. And there's not I'm trying to manipulate you by giving you an ultimatum. I'm simply putting down a boundary. And there are
Right.
so many clients that will resist that
Hmm.
because they keep thinking it's an ultimatum. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's they are unwilling to put down a boundary. They don't know what boundaries are. And they also don't know. Well, the other part that then happens also is that somebody, because the boundaries are hard for people, somebody will throw down a boundary that uh, is a little bit comical in a way because you're like you're never going to follow through on that. You've said that so many times. Like if he doesn't stop drinking, you're going to leave,
Mm.
or if that you're full of shit, really, and that if you're going to throw down, if you're going to actually say, if you do this, I will leave, you've got to mean it
Mm.
because otherwise, if you throw down and you don't do it, then you get what you deserve,
Yeah.
which means that you tell the other person that whatever you say is bullshit and they can keep doing whatever the hell they want to do and you will stay.
It's just like parking tickets and taking the car away. Same thing.
Exactly.
You
Yep.
keep getting parking tickets.
Yep.
Yeah.
You, you, you
I feel like this is a parenting show sometimes.
until you're, it overlaps, right?
Yeah, it totally does. It's interesting too when you talked about, setting the boundaries and that people don't necessarily want to do that because it sounds like an ultimatum. You're really giving your partner a choice, right? I mean, choice sounds a little bit less scary than an ultimatum, right? Like I'm gonna if you are
Yeah.
drinking, drinking's a deal breaker for me, and I can't deal with it. And if you're gonna continue to drink, I can't be with you. Then it's like, okay, well, I need to either stop drinking or need to accept the fact that this person's gonna leave me.
Yeah. Your one is standing in firm self, um, what do we want to say, self understanding, and that what works for you, what doesn't work for you, that and really just saying, hey, this is my boundary. And the ultimatum is done, is it has fear. It's a fear-based tactic, right? And it's done to try to scare the other person into changing their behavior. So there's a very different energy behind it.
And I'm guessing you don't recommend ultimatums, correct? You
I do not recommend
got
ultimatums.
it.
That, I mean, when does that ever work for people?
Sure, sure. It,
You know,
baseball bat management doesn't work all the time like that.
but
So
I think the thing that happens that is challenging, and there's something that's chronic and that is kind of subtle. So perhaps, like I had a couple yesterday, and they have an issue in their relationship where they make agreements and one person constantly uh, doesn't abide by the agreement
okay,
and
it's annoying.
decides to go against the agreement when and if they want to. And so so this happens a lot in relationships. Like at what point does the person who isn't breaking the agreement get to, hey, if you break another agreement, then we're done, rather than, um, than continuing to tolerate it. But then, it's like, oh, we agreed that we would brush our teeth before bed. I don't know. I mean, something stupid that is like happening in a little thing that they've agreed upon and the person doesn't follow through, then they're stuck with, is that something that I then call it on? Or is that stupid to call it over that? I mean, they still didn't follow through. And I said I would leave, but now I don't know, like there's a gray issue with those things. And so you really have to, the therapist has to help them think through those scenarios. Sorry, did I break up?
A little bit. You just said that the therapist has to get you through those scenarios.
Yeah, like the therapist has to help the clients think through those, that if say that she says, well, okay, if we make another agreement and, it doesn't work for me to be in a relationship where we make agreements and we don't follow through on them. So that if you aren't willing to follow through on them and we make another agreement, then we're done. Then it's my responsibility to say, okay, so if you guys agree you're not going to have dessert and all of a sudden he's sneaking a chocolate chip cookie, you're leaving him. Right. So, right. I am making sure that she is good with whatever she has actually.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
because that in certain circumstances, it sounds silly, right? But you're making sure that she understands the
and,
seriousness of the the decision. Yep.
right. I mean, and with that example, you know, the therapist has to do a better job. It, was very different than just dealing with a deal breaker, because what we talked about was how the two of them are functioning under different principles, and in terms of how the relationship work and how agreements work. So that has to be dealt with first before we can see whether it's a deal breaker or not. Like they're not in agree. Like if say he says, I'm sorry, I think we can make an agreement, but if I feel like breaking it, then I get to do that. And she says, no, an agreement is an agreement. And we don't break that unless we talk about it first. And they cannot come to an agreement on that. Then that's the deal breaker. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, completely. I wanna jump to this question from Scott here. It says, "When is the best time to discover the deal breakers in a relationship? Too soon, it's too serious, too fast, too late, you are too committed." So, in other words, if you're talking about deal breakers on the first date, it's kinda like, "Whoa." But once you're committed and then you've discussed them, obviously, that can cause some issues too. What do you think about that?
Um, the sooner the better. So I don't think that talking about deal breakers on a first date is a bad thing, because you don't waste your time.
Right.
I think, if you're like, hey, do you want kids? If that's a deal breaker, like get it out there. Hey, I mean, I used to, when I was single, and I'd be interested in a guy, and then I found out he smoked cigarettes. Done.
Mm.
Like, I don't care how great he was. It's a deal breaker for me. And I knew it, and I didn't need to even talk about it, really. It was just, we're done.
Yeah.
Um, and I ended a relationship with somebody who, uh, I really loved, but he was a self-admitted alcoholic and was not going to get treatment. And I was like, not gonna get married and do that to myself or my children. So no.
Right.
And so the sooner the better. It's never too early.
Yeah. Okay. Do's and don'ts for handling deal breakers. I imagine this is from the couple's perspective. What should you do? What should you
Yeah.
not do?
Well, do not. Do not kick the can down the road.
Deal with it.
Throw down unless you really mean it. Get help to deal with them, because when the attachment system, when we pair bond, meaning we come together as a pair, that's a very, very strong unit. It is hard to break. They don't make songs about that for no reason. It's like breaking up is hard to do. Like
Yeah.
that's so it is so hard for couples to actually deal with these things on their own because of that attachment system. And not to say that you can't, it's just if you're kind of stuck, or you even think there might be something going on and you need some help flushing it out. I mean, I suggest getting like a therapist to help you, and work it, and know that you are better off to end a relationship than kick the can down the road with a deal breaker unsettled.
Okay.
Because it takes, when you have those things underground that aren't settled, they're getting played out in all these different ways.
They fester.
And they do fester, and that's called allostatic load. What's
Okay.
called allostatic load. And the more allostatic load you have in the relationship on yourself, the more energy that takes, and the more it then wreaks havoc on your physical health. Heart attacks, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, XYZ, they're all related to high allostatic load. And you do not want that.
Yeah. So are you more of a mediator in these situations, or a therapist, or both when it comes to hashing out deal breakers?
As a therapist, I have a jillion different hats on in a session, a jillion different. I'm investigating, I'm mediating, I'm therapist, I'm surgeon, I'm lawyer, I've got so many different hats on. So yes, and yes, yes.
Yes and no and always and
And
forever.
yes, all of the above.
Mm-hmm.
Name a profession.
Can you talk a little bit about, we brought up attachment styles. Are there certain attachment styles that tend to have deal breakers sort of more often than not? And are they the ones that are maybe not willing to budge on some of those? Do you see patterns there as it relates to certain attachment styles?
I would say the tendency, I mean, all couples will run into these things.
Mhm.
Islands, or avoidantly attached, their tendency would be, if we go to the extreme end, would be to say, um, you don't like it? Oh, well, like,
Ah,
I don't need, like, I see things my way. I want things my way. You need to do things my way. That's like a very extreme island. And the wave, or the anxiously attached, would be resentful, would be more whiny, complainy about what they're wanting, but could never actually, would have a very hard time throwing down and saying, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm going to do, or following through.
yeah, because they don't want to lose the other person, really.
Yeah. And they think they can change their mind, or they could just do it their way for fear of loss.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But once, it's just so fascinating. This is how it gets played out. If you have an island and a wave in a deal breaker, that's how it would kind of generically play out.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as the wave is able to actually throw down and actually mean it, that's all of a sudden when the island starts to get bought in and starts to change their tune about, oh, it's my way or the highway. Then all of a sudden they start to change. And, it's like, I liken it to a game of chess where what couples tend to do is they're playing a game of chess and they'll take a piece and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to put it down. I think I'm going to put it down. I think I might move here. But they never take their fingers off of that piece. So the other person can't move. Right. And then they're like, maybe I'll go here. Oh, hold on. I'm going to go here. But they never actually make a move. Then the other person can't make a move. Mm-hmm. So they just stay stuck, which happens all the time with couples. They just like to stay stuck in this murky thing, because they're so afraid. They think in their mind, if I make this move and I actually take my fingers off of this, they will make this move and then I'll make this move. They think they know. They really have no idea. They have no idea, but they're so afraid of what will happen because in their mind they've played it out that they won't make a move. And then they'll just stay stuck. And so what the therapist's job is to put pressure on the system so that at least one of them makes a move and it's clear, so that then we see, what does the other person do with that? Because then it's their turn and they make a move and then the next person makes a move. It's not over till it's over.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that analogy. Oh, so many parallels to real life. All right. Well, we're at the half-hour mark. I feel like we've exhausted that deal breaking thing. We've got more topics up for next week. Do we want to keep this time frame, do you think? We like it? Maybe?
I think so. Next week. I know next week I can't do in the morning.
Okay. So. Yeah, we'll tentatively plan for that. You guys can check out Live Happily Ever Awesome on Instagram to get updates, clips. We'll have audio out on the podcast platforms shortly, and look for clips and things like that. Again, we are always looking for couples that want to be spotlighted on the show. We always have a call-in number if you guys want to call in with your questions, and we'll always take some polls to figure out what topics we want to talk about next.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to, like, if the couple decides to come on and they, it's like you don't have to just take your hugest thing. It could be a little thing, or it could be something that you get stuck on. It's like rinse and repeat. Yeah. And that I could try to help you guys get unstuck, which then translates into your whole relationship, which would be amazing for you and relieve allostatic load.
I love it. That's a big word. Allostatic load. How do you spell that? ALASTATIC?
ALLO, and then static.
Allostatic. All right, I'm going to Google that.
Allostatic.
I like to learn new words.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you as always. Have a great week. You guys hang tight, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.